Today I'm reading from Liberating the Heart by Lawrence W. Jaffe. He was a Jungian analyst. The subtitle is Spirituality and Jungian Psychology. In Chapter 1, which is entitled Individuation, thinking of our current online phenom, Jordan P. Peterson, pay attention to this following paragraph. In the present age of intellectual inflation, words have lost much of their power to persuade. And when you hear the word words, think logos. In the present age of intellectual inflation, words have lost much of their power to persuade. More convincing is the example of a person's life. If one lives a personal truth and it makes that person a better human being, then that truth may be a worthy one. In my view, Jung, standing before his huge audience, frustrated and mortified, and having to eat it, became an example of his main thesis, that in this age every conscious individual is called upon to live a life resembling Christ's. That is, they must honestly experience the transformative power of defeat, or, in religious terms, live the myth of death and resurrection. Following the tragicomical lecture, a gala super party was planned to celebrate the conclusion of Jung's visit. Some of his friends prevailed upon him to say a few final words. Our witness reports that Jung's humbling experience might have influenced his remarks. If so, we owe a debt of gratitude to that inept projectionist, for a more moving statement of Jung's essential vision has not come down to us. Here, in part, is what Jung said. Quote, Jesus, you know, was a boy born of an unmarried mother. Such a boy is called illegitimate, and there is a prejudice that puts him at a great disadvantage. He suffers from a terrible feeling of inferiority, for which he is certain to have to compensate. Hence the temptation of Jesus in the wilderness, in which the kingdom was offered to him. Here he met his worst enemy, the power devil. But he was able to see that and to refuse. He said, quote, "My kingdom is not of this world," unquote. But kingdom it was, all the same. The utter failure came at the crucifixion in the tragic words, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" If you want to understand the full tragedy of those words, you must realize what they meant. Christ saw that his whole life, devoted to the truth according to his best conviction, had been a terrible illusion. He had lived it to the full, absolutely sincerely. He had made his honest experiment, but it was nevertheless a compensation. But because he had lived so fully and devotedly, he won through to the resurrection body. We must all do just what Christ did. We must make our experiment. We must make mistakes. We must live out our own vision of life. And there will be error. If you avoid error, you do not live. In a sense even, it may be said that every life is a mistake, for no one has found the truth. When we live like this, we know Christ as a brother, and God indeed becomes man. This sounds like a terrible blasphemy, but it is not. For then only can we understand Christ as he would want to be understood, as a fellow man. Then only does Christ become man in ourselves. This sounds like religion, but it is not. I am speaking just as a philosopher. People sometimes call me a religious leader. I am not that. I attempt only to understand. And so the last thing I would say to each of you, my friends, is carry through your life as well as you can, even if it is based on error, because life has to be undone, and one often gets to truth through error. Then, like Christ, you will have accomplished your experiment. So be human, seek understanding, seek insight, and make your hypothesis your philosophy of life. Then we may recognize the spirit alive in the unconscious of every individual. Then we become brothers of Christ. In the margin I wrote, next to the following words, this is the key. Christ saw his whole life, devoted to the truth according to his best conviction, had been a terrible illusion. He had lived it to the full, absolutely sincerely. He had made his honest experiment, but it was nevertheless a compensation. Jung is saying that at the end, Christ saw that his whole life had been a compensation for the overwhelming feelings of inferiority he experienced as an illegitimate child. It is with apprehension that I speak so bluntly. I beg forgiveness of those who are offended by these words, but to at least one lonely and forsaken soul, myself, they were redemptive. That Christ's life was, in a way, a compensation does not in the least diminish him. No, it draws me to him and forges an indissoluble bond between us of understanding, admiration, gratitude, and love. To interpret Christ psychologically does not reduce or nullify him. On the contrary, he becomes a living presence in my life. If God is not that, what? If God is not that, what is religion for? A major theme of this book, then, is that a psychological understanding revivifies the ancient religious imagery. Thus, scattered throughout the text will be found translations of scriptural passages into psychological or experiential language. Jesus as my brother. It was in 1977, aboard a jet bound for Israel, my first and only trip to that homeland of our soul, Jew and Christian alike, that I came across the moving testimony quoted above. Like many Jews, especially those whose parents or grandparents were immigrants who had survived persecutions, I would habitually experience, upon hearing the words Jesus Christ, a mild but undeniable aversion reaction, like a cold shock. They were words that seemed to say, "You're excluded." Or it was as if I had been born with the memory of generations of my ancestors being torn and tormented in his name. For me to have a friendly response seemed a terrible betrayal. But this is a rationalization. What I experienced was a kind of emotional reflex, and I didn't question it overmuch. And all in an instant, as I read Jung's words, it was dispelled. I was finally enabled to come to terms with Jesus Christ by understanding him, as Jung said he wanted to be understood, as a brother. He was one who lived his life absolutely devotedly and sincerely, according to his best convictions, only to discover, too late, that it still could be understood as a compensation. If that was the experience of the finest, truest man, who ever lived, what could I expect? Moreover, the fact that he had preceded me in that fate ennobled my experience and gave me the strength to endure it. I knew through the writings of Jung and Edward Edinger that this is the destiny of modern man, to live our lives as consciously as we can, and to see at the end and to see at the end that it was nevertheless full of error. Living Christ's fate makes all of us God's sons and heirs. This knowledge gave me understanding, which gave me courage. I knew my struggle was meaningful because it resembled Christ's.